All right, let's just jump right into it. I am beyond excited for today's explainer because honestly, we're doing something completely unique. We are tearing into the actual theoretical physics hidden inside the legendary game Call of Cthulhu. We're not just recapping a plot here, no. We are going deep into the literal mechanics of reality, probability, and human perception.
So, I want you to totally reconsider your baseline for reality. Think about this. What if cosmic horror isn't actually fiction? What if it's literally just a breakdown of your biological firewall? Like, what if all those sanity shattering visions Lovecraft wrote about were actually just lossy, compressed metaphors for real underlying multiversal mechanics? Well, today we're going to prove exactly how the game's creeping dread maps perfectly to real concepts in systems physics and wave dynamics. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're starting with the cosmic horror mechanic, then moving into the anatomy of attractor basins and the K-field carrier wave. After that, we'll reframe madness as filter collapse, look at the Riverside Institute trap, and finally, figure out navigating the cosmic lattice.
Starting right off with part one, the cosmic horror mechanic. Let's step back into a dingy Boston office in 1924, right into the shoes of private investigator and World War I veteran Edward Pierce. So, as Pierce is investigating this deeply weird death on isolated Darkwater Island, we get introduced to the game's famous sanity, or SAN, meter. But listen, this is definitely not your standard video game health bar. If we look at this through the lens of systems physics, that meter is a real-time measurement of Pierce's perceptual filters actively degrading. It is the literal representation of a human mind being forced to process the crushing, absolute insignificance of our existence against a vast, totally uncaring cosmos. And this brilliantly illustrates the actual scientific cascade of a mind descending into madness. Look at how this works. First, a chemical gradient creates an initial attractor. Think of a dopamine hit, or, for Pierce, his heavy reliance on alcohol. Second, the brain's electromagnetic field reorganizes itself around that new default oscillation. Third, the null layer clamps weaken, and that causes identity blur and intense instability. And finally, the plasma layer tries to fill that gap, which creates this massive craving because your whole system is desperately trying to return to a destabilized attractor. It is not magic, folks. It is literally just physics. Which brings us to part two, anatomy of attractor basins. Because to truly grasp what is happening to Pierce on a mechanical level, we've got to pivot straight into theoretical systems physics. By definition, an attractor basin is a stable configuration or a deep topological valley in the probability field where energy, matter, and behavior naturally settle and they really resist leaving. And I want to be super clear here. These are not abstract math concepts. They are the physical grooves of reality that literally dry the paint of our universe. Once a biological node, like, a person, falls into one of these, it takes almost zero energy to just stay there. But it requires a massive hydraulic surge of energy to climb back out. So we can actually categorize these basins using a ternary state machine, mapping human emotions directly to physical coordinate states. You've got the +1 state, which is resonance. That's your flow state. High degrees of freedom, synchronization, totally constructive. Then there's the 0 state, the null or K state. This is the pivot point, giving you maximum degrees of freedom and pure superposition. But the real threat in our story? The -1 state, rot or depression. This is a high-entropy collapse well. The walls are so incredibly steep that a person becomes topologically locked in trauma or grief, or hey, even just endlessly doom-scrolling on your phone at 3 a.m. It is a literal topological trap. All right, moving to part three, the K-field carrier wave. What is the actual substrate holding all these attractors? Brace yourselves, because we're about to massively shift how we view the universe, moving from our safe, muted, everyday reality into the exploding, chaotic hyperdensity of the K-field. Now, what's really interesting here is this stark contrast. Our biology is literally giving us camouflage. When you look up at the night sky, you see empty black space, right? But that is just a heavily filtered, low-signal region designed to protect our classical nervous systems. The horrifying truth? The raw K-field is a hyperdense carrier wave. It is a roaring, turbulent ocean of overlapping probability fields and intense relational tethers. And this is where it all comes together so beautifully. We can perfectly map Lovecraft's terrifying Great Old Ones to the exact functions and errors of a universal operating system.
Look at this. Azathoth is the raw computation kernel. When it airs out, boom, over-entropy and white noise collapse. Yog-Sothoth, that's the routing gateway of spacetime. Errors there cause phase desynchronization or lost time. Nyarlathotep is the compiler, translating all that chaotic data. So when he glitches, you get distorted, false patterns. And Cthulhu himself is the planetary renderer of data. When he goes into sleep mode drift, it creates massive psychic interference. So they aren't just monsters, they are literal system architecture.
Part 4. Madness as filter collapse. So what actually happens when a fragile human mind is forced to interface directly with this raw cosmic operating system? I really want to completely reframe this for you. Madness is not a sickness. It is an acute failure of your biological cryptographic filter. In the game, as Pierce's sanity meter drains, he isn't getting a disease. His biological rendering layer is actively falling apart. That allows the raw, unrendered K layer to bleed directly into his conscious awareness. It is quite literally an overload of absolute truth. I want to highlight this quote straight from the source material. It says, "What human perception renders as the black, empty vacuum of space is an artifact of this encryption doing its job." Now that implies something deeply unsettling. Those horrifying entities, the twisting non-Euclidean geometry, they do not suddenly appear out of nowhere. Our protective filters just drop, and we are suddenly exposed to the ambient -1 attractors that were always there, just pulsing away in the background of reality. Let's check out Part 5, the Riverside Institute Trap. To really see how this is weaponized against people, let's jump to that specific nightmare in Chapter 5, where Edward Pierce wakes up in the Riverside Institute. So the Institute is run by the incredibly sinister Dr. Fuller, and he tells Pierce, essentially, that his claims of eldritch horror are merely delusions and symptoms of mental illness. Fuller is entirely using his medical authority to invalidate Pierce's subjective reality. And why? To protect the cult's dark secrets and keep the actual cosmic truth totally hidden. So the crucial point we need to take away here is that the Riverside Institute isn't just a hospital, it is a physical machine. It operates as a massive -1 attractor basin. It's a rut basin specifically designed for containment. It deliberately generates profound terror and despair to strip away a patient's agency, effectively zeroing out their degrees of freedom. By using this kind of systemic gaslighting, the institution enforces topological locking. Just like highly toxic real-world institutions, they are quite literally farming kinetic and thermal energy from individuals who are trapped in these endless deterministic trauma loops. Which brings us to Part 6, Navigating the Cosmic Lattice. If our institutions, our personal traumas, and the very operating system of the cosmos itself are all constantly trying to drag us into these -1 gravity wells, how on earth do we survive? Let's move to our final takeaway. Let's see how this actually gives us a mechanical solution to these cosmic traps. You cannot outthink a deep attractor basin. The current is simply way too strong, but you can absolutely escape it. You break the current via noise injection, which is kind of like bumping a record player so the needle skips out of a deep groove. Or, even more powerfully, you use co-regulation. This means you literally go stand next to a stronger antenna. You borrow the rhythm of a stable +1 person and sync your internal clock to their healthier frequency until you can regain your own degrees of freedom. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, but I want to leave you with a deeply chilling thought to chew on. If madness is really just the dropping of a firewall, and our reality is just a highly filtered rendering of a hyper-dense cosmic carrier wave, what are your own perceptual filters currently hiding from you? What exactly is lurking in the ambient probability fields of your own life, just waiting for the encryption to fail? Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.